Hello. At IES, we're excited to be able to announce Visual Analysis version 18. We've put together a couple of short clips on displaying some of the new features in VA 18. These videos are for folks who have used visual analysis in the past and are comfortable with the user interface. So let's go down the list of things that we've done. First off, we've made it a high priority to boost the performance of Visual Analysis 18. All things that you do should appear to be faster and peppier, including basic selections, basic changing of values in the inspectors, and the analysis operations in general. Another thing we've done is worked hard to remove what we call time bloat, whereas if visual analysis was left open for an hour or two, it would tend to consume your computer's resources and eventually slow to a crawl. Let's look at a few of the things now that we can show you in Visual Analysis 18. First off, the user interface pretty much remains the same. We have added a feature from Visual Analysis 12, and that is the structure type. We had many customers who had a desire to work in a 2D modeling environment, so we've gone back to giving you the option of having a space frame or a plane frame. If I choose a plane frame, we'll notice that when I'm drawing and working with objects or elements now, we just have 2D coordinates. For example, when I select a node, we have just X and Y for coordinates. We have supports for just displacements and rotations consistent with a plane frame. So the plane frame is back. The structure will be assumed to be supported out of plane. You won't be allowed to apply any loads out of plane. Another thing you should have noticed as we were doing that is as we're drawing a member, its length is being displayed at the origin when we start drawing it. So we have feedback as to how long your member is when you're drawing. Similarly, if I draw things like areas or plates, as I draw the object, its area will be displayed as I'm drawing. Another thing to point out, we had many comments from customers who liked the print preview behavior of Visual Analysis 12, and so we've brought that back as well. So if I do a print preview, by default we're trying to fit it with the same aspect ratios, and there's a lot of white space. We are now giving the option to fill the page, and now we'll see that we're making much more use of all the white space on the page. So the print preview has been improved in that manner. We also now allow importing of both DXF and DWG files. So the DWG CAD format is now available for import and export. Let's look at a 3D model and we can demonstrate a couple other things. In this model, I have a member that is crossing two areas that are drawn. We now have the ability to trim the member and to split the member at those areas. So for example, if I select the member, do a right mouse, and select split members, one of the options is at the crossing planes now. So when I do that, we'll see I have now split that member into pieces at the crossing planes. I'll do that. The other thing we can do is trim it to those planes. So if I select it again, select trim members, it immediately drops it down and the free ends that we're projecting are now removed. So the ability to trim to crossing planes and plate elements is in Visual Analysis 18. We have seen many times where customers have created areas which are defined by vertex coordinates and also have framing members that may be slightly out of plane. And this can be an issue, for example, of getting area loads applied to those members. I have a little example here where I have 5 members drawn, and the nodes for those members are slightly below the plane. So we have the ability to select those nodes and to snap them up to the plane so they will lie in the plane. So if I do that, if I select those nodes that are at that 11.5 foot coordinate, and in addition, if I select the plane that I'd like to snap them to, if I use my right mouse button, I have the ability to snap nodes to an area. And the snap distance, anything within this distance will be moved because I'm about a half a foot off. I'm going to make it a large distance and say anything within a 1 foot distance from the plane, we're going to move it up. And sure enough, we've moved those nodes now to lie in the plane of the area, and therefore any area loads now will get applied to those members and won't be missing. Another thing that we're allowed to do now in Visual Analysis 18 is if we're going to mesh an area, I have the ability to create soil springs at those generated plates. So I can do that. And you notice we have springs now showing. We can enter a subgrade modulus for those springs. And we can also flip whether the soil's on the bottom or the top of the area, and thus the direction of those compression-only springs. We can also select an area edge in VA18, and by right mouse button, I can now set supports for those nodes, and now I fixed the nodes that are generated along that edge. So context menu help for supporting area edges. We had the ability as well, if I hold down my shift key and right mouse button and drag, we can do circular selection. So I can draw a circular selection area and select everything in that area as well. So circular selection is now available by shift, right mouse button, and drag. Some more minor things. We now allow you to rename areas as well as the other objects. Areas were left out in earlier versions and are now included. Member offsets for certain shapes can now be entered in beta coordinates. And let's show you what we mean by that. I'm going to take this member and I'm going to switch it from a W shape to an angle. And angles in general have issues with their coordinate system, the principal coordinates being rotated. So if I switch this to an angle, make it fairly large so I can see it, I turn off the areas, and now I'm going to rotate it around, kind of looking in on the edge of the angles. Turn off those meshed plates as well. You can see that the local coordinate system is rotated 45 degrees from what are the structure Y and Z global directions. In earlier versions of VA, if I selected that member, the only way I could offset it was in local coordinates. So for instance, if I make the offset Z 6 inches, 0.5 feet, you see we moved it in the local Z coordinate, but many times you want to move that angle vertically in the global system. The way we can do that is, let's put it back, and now we'll switch the offset coordinates from local coordinates to what we call the beta 0 coordinates. The beta 0 coordinates are the coordinates as you are looking at it. So offset Y, we ought to be able to drop it vertically now 1 foot, or raise it 1 foot as I did in the example. So we have the ability to deal with offsetting things where the principal axes don't align with the overall coordinate system. Another thing you should notice in this drawing as we're going through is that we are now showing a wireframe around the members, so it's more visible, more apparent what the cross-sectional shape is. If we look at the beam down here, the wide flange beam, we have some mesh plates connecting. That's why we're seeing these objects. But see, we're showing a wireframe overlay, which will help in visualizing the graphics objects. Another thing we can do is to do tab selection. If I open up a structure that's a little more complicated, has a lot more members, if I, for example, select a node, now when I hit my tab key, I'm going to select that node, then nearing members as I continue to hit my tab key, it keeps working my way around to farther and farther objects. So holding down the tab key while selecting an object will change the selection to elements close by. A minor point is that now when I have a drop-down combo in my inspector, you don't have to hit the down arrow any longer to make it drop down. You can hit anywhere in the box and it'll drop down. We have the ability now, if we want to make a member tapered, let's look at this member and let's switch it to a tapered shape. Now we see we have it tapered from large to small. In previous versions, you couldn't switch the starting and ending dimensions. The starting depth was always hard fixed to the size of the member. Now we have the ability to reverse ends. So when I do that, you notice now we've switched the taper going the other way. So that will help out with tapered members. We have the ability to have sticky notes on and off in a filter. Let's create a sticky note here, for example. It's just a screen sticky note. I'll move it up here and it just says enter text. If we look over in the model filter now, we have the ability here in the window options to turn sticky notes off